I can cure him in 2 minutes. The voice cut through the tension. Every head turned at once. The team of specialists, the worried executives, the billionaire's assistant, all eyes landing on the unexpected speaker. Kate Bennett stood in the doorway, her cleaning uniform still damp with sweat. Some doctors scoffed, others pulled out their phones to call security. "Are you not the cleaning lady?" Someone whispered. What happened next was a transformation no one expected. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video, and comment where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories. And trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now let me take you back to where the story really began. 42 floors above Chicago, where a billionaire was dying from a disease no specialist could name, and the woman who held his cure was cleaning his floors moments ago. The 42nd floor of the Willis Tower offered a commanding view of Lake Michigan, steel gray waters reflecting the winter sky like polished pewter. Harrison Caldwell stood before the panoramic windows of his penthouse office, his tall frame casting a shadow across imported Italian marble floors. At 52, he possessed the kind of presence that commanded boardrooms. Silver hair perfectly styled, sharp blue eyes, and a jaw that spoke of generations of privilege. His charcoal wool suit tailored on Savile Row fit his athletic build like a second skin. But today something was different. His usually steady hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his platinum cufflinks, and a thin sheen of perspiration dotted his brow, despite the December chills seeping through the glass. The test results. Dr. Phillips. Harrison's voice carried its usual authority. Though a careful observer might detect the hairline crack beneath, Dr. Jonathan Phillips, head of oncology at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, shifted uncomfortably in his leather chair. At 60, he delivered thousands of diagnoses. But this one felt different. This wasn't just any patient. This was Harrison Caldwell, whose pharmaceutical empire had revolutionized cancer treatment, whose donations had built entire hospital wings. The MRI shows no tumors. Harrison blood work is peculiar. Your white cell count fluctuates daily, but not in any pattern we recognize. Fatigue, the intermittent fever, the weight loss, it doesn't fit any known pathology. Harrison turned from the window, his face a mask of controlled concern. I've been to Mayo Clinic, Johns Hopkins, Cedars-Sinai. 19 specialists. Dr. Phillips. 19 of the most brilliant medical minds in America. And you're telling me they can't identify what's killing me? The word killing hung in the air like smoke. Dr. Phillips cleared his throat. We're not certain it's terminal dash. I can feel it. Harrison's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Something is consuming me from the inside. I wake up each morning weaker than the last. My body is betraying me, and your medical science can't explain why. What do you think is happening to Harrison? Have you ever felt like the experts couldn't help you when you needed it most? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories of unexpected healing and love. 40 floors below, Catherine Kate Bennett stepped off the red line at Monroe, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid Chicago air. At 38, she moved with the quiet efficiency of someone accustomed to being invisible. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a simple style, revealing high cheekbones and warm green eyes that missed nothing. She wore a practical navy coat over her uniform, a crisp white blouse, and black slacks that she pressed herself each morning. Kate had been cleaning Harrison Caldwell's penthouse for 3 years, yet they'd exchanged perhaps 50 words total. To him, she was simply part of the building services, like the doorman or the maintenance crew. But Kate knew Harrison better than he realized. She knew he took his coffee black at exactly 6:30 a.m., that he worked until midnight most evenings, and that he kept a silver-framed photograph of a little girl hidden in his desk drawer. As she rode the elevator to the 42nd floor, Kate noticed her reflection in the polished steel. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. Katie, the body speaks to those who know how to listen. Doctors here with machines, but healers here with the heart. Kate's grandmother had been a folk healer in rural Kentucky, sought out by people when conventional medicine failed. She taught Kate to read the subtle signs. The way someone held their shoulders when grief lived in their chest. How the skin changed color when the spirit was sick. the smell that lingered around those whose bodies were fighting invisible battles. For weeks now, Kate had noticed changes in Mr. Caldwell. The way he gripped the marble countertop when he thought no one was looking. The untouched meals left on his desk. The prescription bottles multiplying like mushrooms after rain. But most telling was the scent. Not the expensive cologne or aftershave, but something underneath. Something her grandmother would have recognized. Immediately, Kate's keycard beeped as she entered the penthouse. The space was a monument to success. Original Picassos on the walls, a grand piano that no one played, furniture that cost more than most people's cars. But today it felt different. Today it felt like a mausoleum. She found Harrison collapsed in his leather chair, Dr. Phillips gone. Staring at a folder marked confidential medical records. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his tie loosened. For the first time since she'd known him, Harrison Caldwell looked human. Kate began her cleaning routine, but her eyes kept drifting to her employer. His breathing was shallow, irregular. His skin had a grayish pallor that reminded her of her uncle during his final illness, not from disease, but from losing hope. As she dusted the bookshelf near his desk, Kate caught sight of the hidden photograph. The little girl couldn't have been more than 7, with Harrison's blue eyes and a gap-toed smile written on the back in fading ink. Annie, age 7, last Christmas. Kate's heart clenched. She'd wondered about the sadness that seemed to live behind Harrison's eyes, the way he worked obsessively as if trying to outrun something. Now she understood. Grandmother had always said that grief could make the body sick in ways no doctor could cure. Harrison looked up suddenly, as if sensing her observation. A moment, their eyes met across the vast room. Kate saw something she'd never seen before in his gaze. Not arrogance or dismissal, but desperate, bone-deep fear. "Kate," he said, and she started. He'd never used her name before. "Yes, Mr. Caldwell." He opened his mouth as if to say something important, then seemed to think better of it. "Never mind. Thank you for being here." It wasn't much, but it was. More vulnerability than Harrison Caldwell had shown anyone in years. Kate nodded and continued her work. But something had shifted in the penthouse that morning. An invisible barrier had developed the first hairline crack. Outside Chicago's December wind rattled the windows. But inside, 2 lives were about to collide in ways neither could imagine. Harrison had spent millions seeking answers from the world's finest doctors, never suspecting that salvation might come from the woman who cleaned his floors and saw everything. He tried to hide. The stage was set for a healing that would save not just Harrison's body, but both their souls. The Caldwell Industries boardroom occupied the entire 48th floor, its glass walls offering a commanding view of the Chicago skyline. 24 executives sat around a mahogany table that could have doubled as a landing strip, their faces illuminated by the glow of tablets and laptops. At the head of the table, Harrison Caldwell commanded attention despite the tremor in his hands that he tried desperately to hide. "Queens show a 12% increase in our biotech division," Harrison announced, his voice steady even as sweat beaded. Along his hairline, December sun streaming through the windows felt like July heat against his skin. "The new Alzheimer's treatment protocol has exceeded all expectations." Board member Patricia Holt leaned forward, her red blazer bright against the neutral tones of the room. "Harrison, the FDA approval timeline concerns me. Can we expedite?" The world tilted sideways. Harrison gripped the table's edge as the room began to spin, his vision blurring at the edges. The voices around him became distant, muffled, as if he were underwater. His chest constricted, each breath a monumental effort. "Mr. Caldwell." Patricia's voice seemed to come from miles away. He tried to respond, but the words wouldn't form. His perfectly pressed white shirt clung to his body, soaked with perspiration. The mahogany table rushed up to meet him as his legs gave way, and Harrison Caldwell, billionaire pharmaceutical titan, master of his universe, collapsed in front of 24 witnesses. "Call 911, someone shouted. "Get Dr. Phillips on the line. Clear the room." But Harrison heard none of it. Consciousness slipped away like sand through his fingers, leaving him floating in a dark void where money and power meant nothing at all. 4 floors below, Kate Bennett pushed her cleaning cart through the executive corridors, her practiced movements efficient and silent. She'd finished the penthouse earlier than usual and decided to tackle the boardroom level while most executives were in meetings. The quiet hum of her cart's wheels on polished floors was interrupted by the sudden commotion above. Emergency sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Kate's heart began to race with an inexplicable sense of dread. She'd felt this before. The same cold certainty that had gripped her the morning her father died, and when she'd woken knowing something terrible was about to happen. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and Kate watched as paramedics rushed past her with their equipment. She recognized one of the executives, Patricia Hall, her usually composed face etched with worry. "Is he conscious?" Patricia was asking someone on her phone. Kate's blood turned to ice. Him. There was only one him that would cause this level of panic on the executive floors. Abandoning her cart, Kate followed the commotion to the boardroom. Through the glass walls, she could see Harrison lying motionless. On the carpet, his silver hair dark with sweat, his face the color of ash. Paramed worked over him while executives stood in helpless clusters, their quarterly reports forgotten. "BP is dropping," one paramedic called out. "We need to move him now." Kate pressed closer to the glass, her grandmother's training kicking. Automatically, she watched Harrison's breathing. It's too shallow, too rapid. His skin tone, the way his muscles had gone slack, the faint blue tinge around his lips. But it was something else that made her gasp. Something the paramedics couldn't see. The smell. Even through the glass barriers, Kate caught it. Faint but unmistakable. It's not the metallic scent of physical illness, but something deeper. Something her grandmother would have called soul sickness. The acrid odor of a spirit consuming itself from within. "What are you doing here?" Kate spun around to find Patricia Holt staring at her with suspicious eyes. "You're building services, aren't you? This area is restricted." I was cleaning the lower floors," Kate stammered, suddenly aware of how out of place she looked in her uniform among the suited executives. "I heard the sirens and thought, well, you can think somewhere else. This is a private matter." Kate nodded, backing away, but her eyes remained fixed on Harrison as the paramedics prepared to move him. As they lifted the stretcher, his head lolled to one side, and his unfocused gaze seemed to find hers through the glass. For a split second, she saw not the powerful billionaire who barely acknowledged her existence, but a frightened, broken man who was drowning in something no amount of money could fix. The paramedics wheeled him toward the elevators, Patricia and other executives trailing behind like a worried entourage. Kate stood frozen, her mind racing with possibilities that medical science would dismiss as superstition. "8," her grandmother's voice whispered in her memory. "When the body speaks and doctors cannot hear, it falls to us to listen. Mia, the old ways still know truths that machines cannot measure." Northwestern Memorial Hospital's VIP wing buzzed with activity as Harrison was rushed into the cardiac care unit. Dr. Phillips met the ambulance, his face grim as he reviewed the paramedics' report. Sudden collapse, irregular heartbeat, blood pressure crashed. The lead paramedic rattled off. He was conscious briefly in the ambulance, kept asking for someone named Annie. Dr. Phillips nodded grimly. He knew about Annie, Harrison's daughter, who died in a car accident 5 years ago. The tragedy had transformed a already driven man into a workaholic ghost, pouring himself into his company to avoid dealing with his grief. "Get him into room 302, Dr. Phillips ordered. "I want a full cardiac workup, blood panel, and brain scan, and call Dr. Martinez from psychiatry. We might be dealing with conversion disorder." As the medical team worked, Harrison drifted in and out of consciousness. In his fever dreams, he saw Annie's face, not as she'd been at the end. Broken and still in a hospital bed much like this one, but as she'd lived, laughing, running, calling him daddy in that sweet voice that had been silenced forever. The guilt. "Is eating you alive?" a voice said, though no one was there. "You can't save everyone else's children if you couldn't save your own." Harrison tried to speak, to argue, but the darkness pulled him under again. Back at the Caldwell Industries building, Kate couldn't concentrate on her work. Her hands moved automatically, dusting, vacuuming, organizing. But her mind was 40 floors away in a hospital room. She'd seen that look before in her uncle's eyes during his final months. The look of a man being consumed not by disease, but by something far more insidious. As evening fell over Chicago, Kate made a decision that would have seemed impossible. That morning, instead of taking the Red Line home to her modest apartment in Logan Square, she walked the 12 blocks to Northwestern Memorial Hospital. The VIP wing was heavily secured, but Kate had learned long ago that cleaning staff were invisible to most people. She found a supply closet, borrowed a hospital cleaning uniform, and moved through the corridors with the same silent efficiency. She employed at Caldwell Industries. Room 302 was guarded by a private security officer, but he was engrossed in his phone, probably checking sports scores. Kate slipped past him with a mop bucket and entered the room. Harrison lay connected. 2 monitors that beeped and hummed with electronic precision. His face was peaceful in sleep, but Kate could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched the bedsheets. Even unconscious, he was fighting something. She approached quietly, her trained eye taking in details the doctors might miss. The way his breathing changed when the machines made certain sounds, as if his body was rejecting their help. The photographs on the bedside table, all of the same little girl at different ages. The prescription bottles lined up like soldiers, medications for symptoms, but nothing for the root cause. Kate pulled a small vial from her pocket. Lavender. Oil her grandmother had taught her to make, infused with herbs that calmed troubled spirits. She dabbed a tiny amount on Harrison's pillow, just enough for his unconscious mind to register the scent. "I know what's making you sick," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the machines. "Your body is trying to tell you something, but you're not listening. You're not dying from any disease, Mr. Caldwell. You're dying from a broken heart." Harrison's breathing changed slightly, becoming deeper, more regular. The tension in his face began to ease. Kate stood to leave, but Harrison's eyes suddenly opened, focusing on her with startling clarity. "You," he said, his voice but alert. "You're Kate from the penthouse." "I shouldn't be here," Kate whispered, glancing toward the door. "I just wanted to make sure you were. Don't go." The desperation in his voice stopped her. "Please. Everyone else looks at me and sees dollar signs or treatment protocols. You look at me and see something else. What do you see?" Kate hesitated, knowing that her next words would change everything between them. "I see a man who's been running from grief for so long that it started eating him alive. 20 doctors can't cure you because they're treating your body, Mr. Caldwell, but your soul is what's sick." Harrison stared at her, and for the first time in 5 years, someone had spoken a truth that cut straight to his core. Outside the room, Dr. Phillips was approaching with test results, unaware that the real diagnosis had just been delivered by a woman with no medical degree, but infinite wisdom about the human heart. The healing was about to begin. Physically sick, but emotionally broken. Sometimes the heart needs healing before the body can follow. Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe. Kate's about to change everything, Harrison thought. He knew about medicine. Dr. Phillips burst through the door of room 302 with the energy of a man who'd found gold. His tablet glowed with test results, his eyes bright with the kind of excitement that only came from solving medical puzzles. Behind him trailed Dr. Rebecca Martinez, the hospital's chief psychiatrist, her burgundy blazer crisp despite the early hour. "Harrison, we need to discuss your treatment plan," Dr. Phillips announced, then stopped short. The room was empty, except for rumpled sheets and the lingering scent of something floral. "Where's my patient?" he demanded of the passing nurse. "Mr. Caldwell discharged himself an hour ago," she replied, checking her chart. Against medical advice, his driver picked him up at 6 a.m. Dr. Phillips's face flushed red. What the man collapsed yesterday. His cardiac enzymes were elevated. His white count is still fluctuating. He seemed quite determined, doctor said. He had important business to attend to. Dr. Martinez adjusted her wire-rimmed glasses, classic avoidance behavior. The patient was likely overwhelmed by yesterday's vulnerability episode and retreated to familiar territory, where he feels in control. Familiar territory isn't going to cure whatever's killing him, Dr. Phillips muttered, already reaching for his phone. "I'm calling him directly." 42 floors above Chicago's bustling streets, Harrison Caldwell stood in his penthouse shower, letting scalding water beat against his shoulders. The hospital's antiseptic smell clung to his skin despite the expensive soap. But it was the memory of Kate's words that he couldn't wash away. "Your soul is what's sick." "Ridiculous," he muttered, turning the water hotter. "Each nonsense from someone who cleans floors for a living." But even as he dismissed her words, Harrison's reflection in the steamed mirror looked haggarded, hollow-eyed. The hot shower that should have relaxed him only emphasized how his body trembled with weakness. He dressed carefully in his armor of choice: a navy Tom Ford suit, Italian leather shoes, a silk tie that cost more than most people made in a week. If he looked powerful, perhaps he'd feel powerful again. His phone buzzed insistently on the marble countertop. Dr. Phillips' name flashed on the screen. For the 5th time in 30 minutes, Harrison let it go to voicemail. Instead, he dialed his assistant. "Patricia, I want you to schedule appointments with every specialist we haven't consulted yet. Mayo Clinic has a new immunology department. There's a researcher at Stanford working on rare autoimmune conditions. That German clinic in Munich, the one that treats European royalty, Harrison." Patricia's voice carried concern. "Perhaps you should rest today. Dr. Phillips called my office 3 times. Dr. Phillips had his chance. 20 doctors have had their chances. I'm not giving up because a maid thinks I'm emotionally disturbed." The words came out harsher than he intended, surprising him with their venom. He'd barely spoken to Kate in 3 years. So why did her opinion matter enough to make him angry? "Schedule the appointments. Patricia, I want to be on a plane to Munich by Thursday." 12 floors below, Kate Bennett stood in the service elevator, her cleaning supplies rattling as the car ascended, replaying "Slept the night before," replaying the conversation in Harrison's hospital room. The look in his eyes when she'd spoken about his grief, recognition, fear, and something else. Hope, perhaps, before the walls slammed back up. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. "Truth is like sunlight, Mia. Some people have lived in darkness so long, it burns their eyes when they see it." The elevator dinged softly as it reached the 42nd floor. Kate's keycard admitted her to the penthouse, and immediately she sensed the change. The air felt charged like the moments before a thunderstorm. Harrison was awake and moving around. She could hear his footsteps on the hardwood floors of his bedroom, the sound of drawers being opened and closed with more force than necessary. Kate began her routine, but her attention kept drifting toward the sounds of Harrison's morning. The coffee maker hadn't been used, unusual for a man who lived on caffeine. The untouched breakfast tray from the building's catering service sat cooling on the kitchen counter. "You're late today." Harrison's voice cut through the silence. Kate turned to find him standing in the doorway, impeccably dressed but somehow diminished. His suit hung differently on his frame, as if he'd lost weight overnight. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, despite the expensive concealer he'd applied. "I'm sorry, Mr. Caldwell. I can come back later if you prefer." "No." He moved to the windows, his back rigid. "I wanted to address what happened yesterday at the hospital." Kate's hand stilled on her dusting cloth. "Of course you overstepped." His voice carried the cold authority she remembered from their earliest encounters. "I appreciate that you were concerned, but I don't require amateur psychological analysis from building staff." The words stung, but Kate had expected them. Her grandmother had taught her that people often lashed out when truth came too close to their carefully constructed defenses. "I understand," she said quietly, continuing her work. "Do you?" Harrison turned from the window, his blue eyes sharp with something between anger and desperation. "Because your diagnosis has been quite disruptive. I've had 5 medical professionals call me this morning, all concerned about my mental state as if grief counseling could cure a physical illness." Kate paused, choosing her words carefully. "Your body is physically ill, Mr. Caldwell, but sometimes the body gets sick because the heart is injured. My heart function is perfectly normal. I've had 3 cardiograms. It's not the heart I meant." A simple statement hung between them, like a challenge. Harrison's jaw tightened, and Kate could see the war being fought behind his eyes. the desire to dismiss her completely battling against the part of him that recognized truth when he heard it. "My daughter died 5 years ago," he said suddenly, his voice flat and controlled. "Car accident, drunk driver, ran a red light. I've processed the grief, Ms. Bennett. I've moved forward. I've built a pharmaceutical empire that develops treatments for childhood diseases. I've donated millions to pediatric hospitals. I don't need to heal my heart because my heart is fine." Kate set down her dusting cloth and faced him fully. "Did you last visit her grave?" The question hit Harrison like a physical blow. His face went pale beneath his carefully maintained tan. That's completely inappropriate. "When did you last say her name out loud?" "Not in business meetings about pediatric research or charity galas. When did you last say Annie and let yourself remember her voice calling you daddy?" "Stop." The word came out strangled. "Your body's trying to force you to grieve, Mr. Caldwell. It's creating symptoms that no medicine can cure because medicine can't heal what you won't acknowledge." Harrison's hands began to shake, the tremor he'd been fighting all morning becoming visible. "You don't know what you're talking about. You're a cleaning woman with some folk medicine nonsense your grandmother taught you. You didn't go to medical school. You don't understand complex biological systems. Or I understand that you collapse." "Every time you get close to feeling something real," Kate interrupted, her voice gentle but firm. "I understand that you've turned your penthouse into a shrine to success, because success can't die in car accidents. I understand that you're slowly killing yourself with work and expensive treatments because facing your grief feels more dangerous than dying." Harrison stared at her, his breathing shallow and rapid. For a moment, Kate thought he might collapse. Again, instead, he straightened his tie with shaking fingers and walked to his desk. "I'm flying to Munich on Thursday to consult with specialists at the Hartman Institute," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "They've developed new treatments for autoimmune conditions that American medicine hasn't approved yet. When I return, I expect this conversation to never happen again. Are we understood?" Kate nodded, recognizing the dismissal. But as she gathered her supplies, she noticed Harrison's hands as he pretended to review documents. They trembled against the paper, and his breathing remained labored. "Mr. Caldwell," she said softly. He didn't look up. "Yes, Munich won't cure you either." The words followed Kate out of the penthouse, and Harrison knew with the terrible certainty of a man who tried everything else that she was right. That afternoon, as Kate took the red line home to her apartment, Harrison stood at his window looking down at the Chicago streets. Somewhere in one of those buildings, a drunk driver was probably having a normal Tuesday, unaware that he destroyed 2 lives 5 years ago. Maney's and Harrison's Dr. Phillips voicemail played on speaker. "Your test results show elevated cortisol levels consistent with chronic stress. We need to discuss psychological factors in your treatment plan." Harrison deleted the message and booked his flight to Munich. The resistance was complete, but the cracks in his armor were starting to show. The first-class lounge at O'Hare buzzed. With a quiet efficiency of wealth and privilege, Harrison sat in a leather armchair that cost more than most cars, his untouched whiskey growing warm on the glass table beside him. His flight to Munich had been delayed 3 times. First for mechanical issues, then weather. Now something vague about crew availability. His body felt like it was betraying him with each passing hour. The tremor in his hands had worsened, and a cold sweat clung to his skin despite the lounge's perfect climate control. He'd taken 2 of the experimental medications Dr. Chan from Stanford had prescribed, but they only made him feel more disconnected from his own body. "Mr. Caldwell?" A young flight attendant approached with practiced difference. "I'm afraid I have more bad news about Lufthansa 441. The storm system over the Atlantic has intensified. All transatlantic flights are grounded until at least tomorrow afternoon." Harrison's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. "That's unacceptable. I have appointments at the Hartman Institute. These are world-renowned specialists who don't rashid you for weather. I understand your frustration, sir. We can arrange hotel accommodations." "I don't want hotel accommodations. I want to get to Munich." His voice rose enough to draw glances from other passengers. Harrison caught himself, straightening his tie with trembling fingers. "Call my assistant. Have her charter a private jet." The attendant nodded and retreated, leaving Harrison alone with his growing panic. Each delay felt like a countdown timer, ticking toward some invisible deadline. His body was deteriorating. And somewhere in Germany, doctors with experimental treatments were going about their evening routines. Unaware that Harrison Caldwell was slowly dying 40,000 feet away from their expertise, his phone buzzed. Trisha's name appeared on the screen and Harrison answered before the first ring finished. Harrison, I've called every private aviation company in the Midwest. The storm isn't just over the Atlantic. It's a massive system covering half of Europe. Nobody's flying anything across the ocean tonight. Harrison closed his eyes, feeling the world tilt slightly. The lounges, ambient noise, conversations, clinking glasses. CNN playing on mounted television seemed to grow louder and more chaotic. Then get me on the first available flight tomorrow. First class on any airline. I don't care about the cost. Already done. Lufthansa 441 is rescheduled for 2:15 p.m. tomorrow. But Harrison, maybe this delay is a sign. Dr. Phillips called again. He's concerned about you traveling internationally in your current condition. Dr. Phillips has had his chance to cure me. 20 doctors have had their chances. Harrison's voice carried the edge of desperation. He could no longer hide. I'm not giving up because of weather. Meanwhile, across the city, Kate Bennett stood in the kitchen of her Logan Square apartment, stirring a pot of soup that would have to last her the next 3 days. The studio space was modest, but warm. Mismatched furniture she'd collected over the years, photographs of her family in Kentucky covering one wall, herbs drying in bundles near the window that faced west toward the setting sun. Her grandmother's recipe book lay open on the counter, its pages yellowed with age and stained with decades of use. Kate's finger traced the careful handwriting that described treatments for soul sickness, the kind of illness that attacked from within when grief was left untended. She'd been thinking about Harrison Caldwell constantly since their confrontation 2 days ago. The look in his eyes when she'd mentioned his daughter's name haunted her. She'd seen that same expression in her own mirror after her father died. Desperate desire to feel nothing rather than feel everything. Her phone rang, and Kate glanced at the caller ID with surprise. Building maintenance. Kate, this is Joe from Building Services at Willis Tower. Sorry to bother you at home, but we've got a situation with the Caldwell penthouse. Kate's heart began to race. What kind of situation? Smoke alarm went off about an hour ago. Fire department cleared the building. No actual fire, just something burning on the stove. But here's the weird thing. Mr. Caldwell was supposed to be in Germany by now, according to his assistant. His car service shows he left for the airport this morning. But the alarm logs show someone was in the penthouse when the smoke started. Kate was already reaching for her coat. I'll be right there, Kate. You don't have to. Yes, I do. The 42nd floor felt different at night. Emergency lighting cast long shadows across the marble floors, and the usual daytime energy was replaced by an almost sepulcher. Kate used her keycard to enter the penthouse, immediately hit by the acrid smell of smoke mixed with something else. Fear maybe, or desperation. She found Harrison in the kitchen sitting on the floor with his back against the refrigerator. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, and his expensive suit was wrinkled beyond recognition. On the stovetop, a pot sat charred and ruined, filled with what might once have been soup, but now resembled blackened concrete. Mr. Caldwell? Kate approached slowly, as if he were a wounded animal that might bolt. Are you all right? Harrison looked up, and Kate saw something she'd never seen in his eyes before. Complete defeat. Flight was canceled. Storm over the Atlantic. His voice was flat, emotionless. I've been sitting in airports for 12 hours and my body feels like it's shutting down. Came home and tried to, make soup, I guess. Haven't cooked anything since. Didn't finish the sentence. But Kate understood. Since Annie died. Since he'd stopped living and started surviving. Since when? She asked gently, settling onto the floor beside him. 5 years, 4 months, 18 days? The precision of his answer broke Kate's heart. Annie used to help me make soup on Sunday afternoons. Campbell's tomato with grilled cheese sandwiches cut into triangles. She said triangles tasted better than squares. It was the first time Kate had heard him say his daughter's name without flinching. What kind of soup were you trying to make? She asked. Harrison gestured weakly at the destroyed pot. I bought ingredients. tomatoes, onions, herbs. Thought, maybe if I could remember how, but I can't. I can't remember her voice anymore. Kate. I can't remember what her laugh sounded like. The use of her first name wasn't lost on Kate. Something fundamental had shifted in Harrison's carefully constructed defenses. Grief does that sometimes, she said softly. It's like a protective mechanism. The memories hurt too much, so your mind locks them away. The doctors in Munich have a new treatment, Harrison continued, staring at the ruined pot. Experimental immunotherapy costs $200,000, not covered by insurance. I wired the money yesterday, and if it doesn't work, Harrison was quiet for a long moment. There's a clinic in Switzerland. After that, one in Japan. I have enough money to buy treatments until he didn't finish until you die trying to avoid living. The words hung in the air between them. Harrison turned to look at Kate. Really look at her. The first time since she'd started working for her. Why do you care? He asked. I've barely acknowledged your existence for 3 years. I don't even know your last name. Dennett, Kate said. Kate Bennett and I care because I recognize the look in your eyes. I had the same look after my father died. I spent 2 years trying to work myself to death rather than deal with the fact that he was gone. What changed? Kate smiled sadly. I ran out of money for distractions. Couldn't afford to keep running from the grief. So I had to learn to live with it instead. Harrison considered this, his breathing slightly less labored than it had been all day. I don't know how to live with it. I built an empire to avoid it. I work 18-hour days to avoid it. I spend millions on medical treatments to avoid it, but it's still there eating me alive from the inside. Maybe, Kate said carefully, you need to stop trying to avoid it and start trying to heal it instead. Harrison looked at her with something. Approaching hope? I wouldn't know where to begin. Kate stood and extended her hand to him. Let's start by cleaning up this kitchen. And maybe you can tell me about Annie. Not the tragedy of how she died, but the joy of how she lived. Harrison stared at her outstretched hand for a long moment. Taking it would mean accepting help from someone who wasn't a doctor, wasn't a specialist, wasn't someone whose credentials could justify the risk of hope. Taking it would mean admitting that maybe, just maybe, Kate Bennett knew something about healing that all his expensive experts had missed. Slowly, Harrison reached up and grasped her hand. Kate helped him to his feet, and for the first time in 5 years, Harrison Caldwell took the first step toward healing instead of running. The burned pot could be replaced. The real question was whether Harrison's heart could be repaired. Outside, the storm that had grounded his flight to Munich continued to rage. But inside the penthouse, 2 people sat side by side on the kitchen floor. And Harrison began to remember what his daughter's laugh had sounded like. Dawn broke over Lake Michigan in shades of amber and rose, painting the Chicago skyline in watercolors that no amount of money could purchase. Kate had spent the night on Harrison's leather sofa, an arrangement that would have been unthinkable 48 hours earlier. She'd stayed because Harrison's condition had worsened around midnight. His body racked with tremors and cold sweats that had nothing to do with fever and everything to do with finally letting his guard down after years of rigid control. Kate woke to the sound of Harrison moving around the kitchen, and she found him standing at the marble island with a cup of coffee and a manila folder she'd never seen before. His silver hair was disheveled, his white dress shirt wrinkled from sleeping in his clothes, but his eyes held a clarity that had been missing for months. I canceled Munich, he said, without preamble. Called the Hartman Institute at 4 this morning and told them I wouldn't be coming. Kate approached carefully, noting the way Harrison's hand still trembled slightly as he held his coffee cup. Do you feel about that? Terrified, he admitted, then laughed. A sound that was rusty from disuse. $200,000 down the drain. And I feel terrified but lighter. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. Kate gestured to the folder. What's that? Harrison's expression grew somber. Something I should have shown someone years ago. Annie's medical records from the accident. I've been carrying them with me like some kind of talisman, reading them over and over, looking for something I missed. Some way I could have saved her. Kate felt her heart clench. May I? Harrison nodded, sliding the folder across the marble surface. Kate opened it carefully, aware that she was being trusted with Harrison's most sacred and painful possession. The first page was a paramedic report, clinical and sterile in its language. Female child, approximately 7 years old, found unconscious at scene. Multiple trauma injuries consistent with high-speed vehicular impact. Patient transported to Northwestern. Memorial ETA. 6 minutes. But it was the photograph paperclip to the back of the report that made Kate's breath catch. Annie at what must have been her 6th birthday party, wearing a bright yellow dress with white flowers. Her geputhered smile radiant as she blew out candles on a chocolate cake. Her blonde hair was in pigtails tied with yellow ribbons, and her blue eyes, Harrison's eyes, sparkled with pure joy. She loved yellow, Harrison said quietly, watching Kate study the photo. Said it was the color of happiness. Every birthday, every special occasion, she wore something yellow. Kate turned the page and found herself looking at hospital records that told the story of a 43-hour battle to save a little girl's life. The medical team at Northwestern had performed miracles of modern medicine.
Multiple surgeries, experimental
treatments, around-the-clock monitoring by teams of specialists. You were there the entire time, Kate observed, reading the visitor logs that showed Harrison Caldwell never leaving the hospital. I slept in the chair next to her bed, ate vending machine food, wore the same clothes for 3 days. Harrison's voice grew thick with memory. I was unconscious most of the time, but the doctor said she might be able to hear me, so I talked to her, told her stories, sang the lullabies her mother used to sing before the divorce. Kate found the page she was looking for, the final doctor's report signed by Dr. Jonathan Phillips. The same Dr. Phillips who was now treating Harrison. Despite aggressive intervention and round-clock care, patient Annie Elizabeth Caldwell succumbed to her injuries at 11:47 p.m. on March 23, 2019. Cause of death: massive internal trauma resulting from motor vehicle accident. Patient's father, Harrison Caldwell, was present at time of death. You held her as she died, Kate said softly. Harrison nodded, unable to speak. Kate continued reading, finding notes in the margins written in Harrison's own handwriting. Questions for doctors, research about experimental treatments, desperate calculations about survival rates. But it was the final page that revealed the deepest wound. A psychological evaluation report completed after Annie's death, recommending grief counseling for Harrison. At the bottom, in Harrison's sharp handwriting, someone had written, "Declined. Will handle privately." He refused counseling, Kate observed. I was running a pharmaceutical company, Harrison said defensively. I understood medical science better than any therapist. I thought I could handle my own emotional recovery the same way I handled everything else, with research, planning, and sheer force of will. Kate found another document near the back of the folder. A life insurance payout statement. Let $10 million paid to Harrison Caldwell upon the death of his daughter. Below it, bank statements showing that same $10 million donated to the Children's Hospital of Chicago within a week of the payment. You gave it all away, Kate said. Blood money, Harrison replied bitterly. I couldn't keep money that existed because my daughter was dead. So I donated it, then donated more, then started the pediatric research division at my company. If I couldn't save Annie, maybe I could save other children. Kate closed the folder, understanding now why Harrison's body was failing him. He'd spent 5 years punishing himself, driving himself to superhuman efforts to save others while ignoring his own need to heal. Harrison, she said gently, you know this wasn't your fault, right? Harrison's coffee cup rattled against the marble as his hands began to shake again. She was with me that weekend, court-mandated visitation. If she'd been with her mother, she'd still be dead, Kate said firmly. The drunk driver would have hit their car instead of yours. Or maybe he would have hit someone else's child. Accidents. Don't care about custody arrangements. But if I hadn't taken her to the Science Museum that day, if we'd left 5 minutes earlier or later, if I'd taken Lakeshore Drive instead of Michigan Avenue. Stop. Kate reached across the island and covered Harrison's trembling hands with her own. You're not God, Harrison. You couldn't control a drunk driver any more than you can control your own grief by burying it under work and expensive treatments. Harrison stared at their joined hands, and Kate felt the moment his resistance finally completely crumbled. His shoulders began to shake, and tears he'd held back for 5 years started to fall. She called me Daddy right before the impact, he whispered. We were singing along to the radio, and she saw the other car running the red light. She said, "Daddy, look out." And I swerved, but it was too late. Her last words were trying to protect me. Kate moved around the island and pulled Harrison into her arms, letting him collapse against her shoulder as 5 years of suppressed grief finally found its voice. He cried like a man drowning, great gasping sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than his lungs. She was so small, he choked out. In the hospital bed, she looked so small. The doctors kept saying there was hope, but I could see it in their eyes. They were just giving me time to say goodbye. Kate held him tighter, her own tears falling into his silver hair. "What did you say to her? That I loved her? That she was the best thing I'd ever done with my life? That if she needed to go, it was okay? I told her to find her mom. Annie's mother died when she was 3 and that Daddy would be fine. But you weren't fine." Harrison pulled back to look at Kate, his eyes red but clearer than she'd ever seen them. "I lied to a dying child. I promised her I'd be fine, then spent 5 years slowly killing myself with work and guilt. What kind of father does that make me?" "The human kind," Kate said firmly. "The kind who loved his daughter so much that losing her broke something inside him. There's no shame in that, Harrison. The shame is in refusing to heal." Harrison wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, and Kate noticed that the tremor had stopped. His breathing, while still shaky from crying, was deeper and more regular than it had been in months. "I dream about her sometimes," he admitted. "Always the same dream. She's 7 years old, wearing that yellow dress, and she's asking me why I never visit her grave. I always wake up before I can answer." Kate felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. "When did you last visit her grave?" "Never." The admission seemed to pain him physically. "I paid for the funeral, the headstone, the perpetual care, but I've never actually been there. I tell myself it's because I'm too busy. But the truth is, I'm terrified that visiting her grave will make her death real in a way I can't handle." Kate understood now why Harrison's body was failing. He'd been running from the most basic requirement of grief, acknowledging that the person you love is truly gone. His immune system was attacking itself because his heart was at war with reality. "What if," Kate said carefully, "we went together today? Right now, before you can change your mind or book another flight to another specialist." Harrison stared at her, and Kate could see the battle being fought behind his eyes. 5 years of avoidance versus the possibility of finally truly saying goodbye. "I don't know if I'm strong enough," he whispered. "You are," Kate said with absolute certainty. "Won't be alone." Harrison looked at the manila folder on the counter, then at Kate's face, then at his own reflection in the kitchen window. For the first time in 5 years, Harrison Caldwell was ready to stop running from his grief and start walking toward healing. The visit to Annie's grave would either save him or destroy him. There was only one way to find out. Sometimes healing requires us to face the one thing we've been running from the longest. Do you think Harrison is finally ready to say goodbye to Annie? Share your thoughts below and subscribe. This journey is about to reach its most emotional moment yet. The wrought iron gates of Graceland Cemetery stood open against the gray December sky, their gothic elegance a stark contrast to the snow-dusted gravestones that stretched across rolling hills like a stone garden of memory. Harrison sat in the passenger seat of Kate's modest Honda Civic, his hands clasped so tightly in his lap that his knuckles had gone white. "We can turn around," Kate offered, studying his profile. "There's no shame in not being ready." Harrison shook his head, though his breathing remained shallow and rapid. "I've had 5 years to get ready. If I leave now, I'll never come back." Kate parked near the cemetery's administrative building, and they walked in silence along the winding paths. Harrison had called ahead. One of the few benefits of wealth was that cemetery staff remembered large donations and provided detailed directions to specific graves. Annie's plot was in Section 14 beneath an old oak tree that would provide shade in summer and shelter in winter. She would have loved this place, Harrison said suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper. All the trees and open space. She wanted to be a park ranger when she grew up, said she wanted to take care of places where families could be happy together. Kate squeezed his arm gently. "Tell me more about her." As they walked deeper into the cemetery, Harrison began to speak. and with each word, the little girl he'd been hiding from came back to life. She was fearless, he said, a ghost of a smile. Touching his lips, climbed every tree in Lincoln Park, rode her bike without training wheels when she was 4. Her mother used to say Annie got her daredevil streak from me, but I think she was braver than I ever was. They paused at a fork in the path, and Harrison consulted the hand-drawn map the cemetery office had provided. She was also stubborn. She decided she wanted chocolate chip pancakes for dinner. She'd argue her case like a tiny lawyer. Present evidence, cite precedents from previous meals, negotiate terms. Kate laughed softly. Sounds like she inherited more than just bravery from her father, maybe. Harrison's expression grew wistful. After her mother died, it was just the two of us for 4 years. She'd crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, and we'd build blanket forts in the living room and eat cereal for dinner. Those were the happiest years of my life. They found section 14, and Harrison stopped walking. About 50 yards ahead beneath. The spreading branches of the oak tree, a small granite headstone, caught the afternoon light. Even from a distance, Kate could see the splash of color against the gray stone. Fresh yellow flowers, bright as sunshine against the winter landscape. "Someone's been here," Harrison whispered, his voice filled with wonder and confusion. They approached slowly, and Kate read the inscription carved into the rose-cold granite. Annie Elizabeth Caldwell, beloved daughter, March 15, 2011 to March 23, 2019. She made every day brighter. At the base of the headstone, a small bouquet of yellow daffodils lay fresh and vibrant, tied with a white ribbon. Beside them sat a children's book, The Secret Garden, and a small stuffed elephant wearing a yellow bow tie. Harrison dropped to his knees in the snow, his face crumpling as the reality of his daughter's death finally fully hit him. I thought if I never came here, she might still be alive somewhere. Stupid, I know, but not stupid, Kate said. Kneeling beside him, human. Harrison reached out with trembling fingers to touch the headstone, and Kate watched as 5 years of suppressed grief finally found its voice. "Hi, baby girl," he whispered. "Daddy's here. I'm sorry it took me so long." As if the cemetery itself was listening, a gentle breeze stirred the oak leaves above them, and a few late-falling acorns dropped to the snow-covered ground. Harrison looked up, and for a moment Kate could have sworn she saw him smile. "She used to collect acorns," he said softly, "had a whole shoebox full of them. Said she was going to plant an oak forest in our backyard so the squirrels would have somewhere to live." Kate noticed something else, a small metal plaque embedded in the ground near the headstone. She brushed away the snow to reveal an inscription. "This tree and surrounding garden lovingly maintained by the Caldwell Children's Foundation." You've been taking care of her, Kate realized. Even without visiting, you've been making sure she's surrounded by beauty. Harrison nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I couldn't come here, but I couldn't let her be alone either. The foundation has been maintaining this section of the cemetery for 3 years. New flowers every month, seasonal decorations, bench repairs." He gestured to a small stone bench positioned a few feet away. "I had that installed so other families would have somewhere to sit with their children." Kate felt her heart swell with understanding. Harrison hadn't been running from his daughter's memory. He'd been carrying it with him in the only way his broken heart knew how. "The flowers are fresh," she observed. "Someone was here recently." Reeson picked up the children's book, and a small envelope fell from between its pages. His name was written on the front in careful, childish handwriting that made him gasp. "That's not." He opened the envelope with shaking hands and pulled out a hand-drawn card. On the front, a stick-figure man in a suit stood next to a stick-figure girl in a yellow dress, both of them smiling under a rainbow inside in the same careful writing. "Thank you for the new playground at our school. Love, KDM, age 7. P.S. I think Annie would like that you help other kids." Harrison stared at the card, and Kate watched, understanding dawn on his face. The children's wing at Northwestern, the playground equipment I donated to Lincoln Elementary, the pediatric research, funding Annie's. "Still helping other children," Kate said softly. "Through you, through the foundation you've built." In her memory, Harrison looked around the cemetery with new eyes, taking in the well-maintained paths, the carefully tended gardens. The other families who were visiting their loved ones in a place of beauty rather than decay. I've been so focused on the fact that I couldn't save her, he said slowly, that I never realized I was still taking care of her, still being her father, just differently. Kate handed him a tissue from her purse, and Harrison wiped his eyes, his breathing finally beginning to steady. I used to read to her every night, he said, holding up The Secret Garden. This was her favorite. She made me read it so many times. I had whole chapters memorized. Would you like to read it to her now? Harrison looked at Kate with surprise, then at the book in his hands. Slowly, he opened to the first page and began to read aloud, his voice carrying across the quiet cemetery. When Mary Lennox was sent to Misselwaite Manor to live with her uncle, everybody said she was the most disagreeable-looking child ever seen. As Harrison read, his voice grew stronger and more confident. Kate watched the tension leave his shoulders, saw color return to his face. For the first time in 5 years, Harrison Caldwell was being a father again, not trying to save his daughter, not trying to change the past, but simply loving her in the present moment. When he finished the first chapter, Harrison closed the book and placed it gently beside the headstone. I'll come back next week and read chapter 2, he promised. She knows, Kate said with absolute certainty. Harrison turned to her. Kate saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Peace. Not complete healing, but the beginning of it. The acknowledgement that grief and love could coexist. That honoring Annie's memory didn't require him to destroy himself in the process. How did you know? He asked. How did you know this was what I needed? Kate smiled, thinking of her grandmother's wisdom, because she'd been grieving alone for 5 years. Grief shared is grief that can heal. As they prepared to leave, Harrison placed his hand on the headstone one more time. I love you, Annie girl. Daddy's going to get better now, I promise. And I'm going to keep helping other children because that's what you would want me to do. The late afternoon sun broke through the clouds just then, casting golden light across the snow and making the yellow daffodils glow like tiny suns. Harrison and Kate walked back to the car in comfortable silence, both understanding that something fundamental had shifted between them. Harrison Caldwell had finally said hello to his grief, and in doing so, had taken the first real step toward saying, hello to love again? Sometimes the hardest part of healing is learning that we can honor our lost loved ones by living fully, not by dying slowly. What do you think? Is Harrison finally ready to choose life over guilt? I'll share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe. This story is about to take a beautiful turn toward hope and unexpected love. The transformation in Harrison over the past 2 days had been nothing short of miraculous. His hands no longer trembled, his appetite had returned, and the gray pallor that had haunted his skin was replaced by healthy color. Kate had watched him come alive in ways that seemed to defy medical explanation, or perhaps proved that some healings required more than medicine. They'd fallen into an easy routine. Kate arrived each morning to find Harrison already awake, coffee brewing, sometimes even attempting to cook breakfast. They'd talk about Annie, not the tragedy of her death, but the joy of her life. Harrison shared stories while Kate listened. And slowly, the penthouse began to feel less like a monument to success and more like a home where healing lived. This evening, Kate was preparing to leave when Harrison emerged from his study, carrying a manila envelope and wearing an expression she couldn't quite read. Kate, we need to talk. Something in his tone made her stomach clench with anxiety. Warmth that had characterized their interactions over the past 2 days was missing, replaced by something formal and distant. Of course, she said, setting down her cleaning supplies. What's wrong? Harrison moved to his desk and pulled out a document that made Kate's blood turn cold. It was a background check report with her photograph paper-clipped to the front page. I had my security team run a comprehensive background investigation, Harrison said, his voice carefully neutral. Standard procedure when someone becomes close to a person in my position. Kate felt the room tilt slightly. Harrison, I can... Explain? Explain what exactly? His blue eyes, which had been so warm and grateful over the past 2 days, now held the chill of a Chicago winter. That you've been fired from 3 previous housekeeping positions for inappropriate boundary crossing? that you were arrested 2 years ago for trespassing at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, that your real name isn't Kate Bennett, it's Catherine. Mario Sullivan, and you legally changed it after serving 6 months in county jail. Each word hit Kate like a physical blow. She'd known this moment would come eventually, but she'd allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, Harrison would see her heart before he saw her history. The arrest at Northwestern, she began, her voice barely above a whisper, was trying to see my father. He was dying, but visiting hours had ended, and they wouldn't let me. According to this report, Harrison continued, consulting the document with the cold precision of a prosecutor. You've made a career out of inserting yourself into wealthy families during times of crisis. The Hendersons and Evston hired you 6 months after their son's suicide. You were terminated when they discovered. You've been researching their family's medical history and offering unsolicited psychological advice. Kate's legs felt weak. She sank into one of Harrison's expensive chairs, her hand shaking as badly as his had been just days earlier. In the Washingtons in Lake Forest, Harrison pressed on relentlessly. Hired you after their daughter was diagnosed with leukemia. You were fired and served with a restraining order after you convinced them to try folk remedies instead of chemotherapy. The child nearly died. That's not what happened, Kate said desperately. Mrs. Washington asked me about my grandmother's healing methods. I never told them to stop medical treatment. I only suggested complementary. Complementary? What? Herbs and superstition? Harrison's voice rose, and Kate heard the anger beneath his controlled facade. You targeted grieving families, Catherine. You exploit people at their most vulnerable moments, offering false hope when they're desperate enough to believe anything. Kate felt tears burning her eyes, but she forced herself to meet Harrison's gaze. Is that what you think I've been doing with you? Exploiting your grief? Harrison was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was deadly calm. You're a very skilled predator who recognized a multi-billionaire having a breakdown and saw an opportunity. I think you researched my history, learned about Annie, and crafted the perfect approach to gain my trust. The accusation hit Kate like a slap. That's not true, isn't it? Harrison stood and began pacing, his earlier peace replaced by the familiar restlessness that had characterized him before their trip to the cemetery. You just happen to know exactly what to say about grief and healing. You just happen to have the perfect folk wisdom to explain my symptoms. You just happen to suggest visiting Annie's grave at the exact moment I was most vulnerable. I suggested visiting the grave because you needed to say goodbye. Kate stood as well, her own anger finally finding its voice. Everything I told you came from my heart, from watching my own family struggle with loss. I never researched you, Harrison. I never exploited you. I saw a man in pain and tried to help. Help, Harrison repeated with bitter laughter. Is that what you call it? According to this report, your help has a pattern. You get close to wealthy clients, gain their trust during medical crisis, then position yourself as indispensable. The Hendersons left you money in their will before they discovered your background and changed it. Kate felt the world crumbling. Around her, I returned that money. I never asked for it, and when I found out, I refused to accept it. After you were caught, Harris countered. After your true motives were exposed. My true motives. Kate's voice broke with emotion.
Oh, my true motive was helping a man I care about heal from grief that was literally killing him.
My true motive was watching someone I've come to love find peace with his daughter's memory. The word love hung in the air between them like a confession and an accusation rolled into one. Harrison stopped pacing and stared at her, his face cycling through emotions too quickly for Kate to read. Love, he repeated softly. How convenient. The grieving billionaire falls in love with his rescuer, and suddenly her questionable past doesn't matter anymore. Kate felt something break inside her chest. Not her heart, but her hope. You don't believe that? Can't believe that? Not after what we shared at Annie's grave? Not after the way you've been healing? Have I been healing? Harrison's voice grew louder, more desperate. Or have I been manipulated by someone who's made a career out of exploiting grieving parents? How do I know the difference anymore? Kate watched in horror as Harrison's hands began to tremble again. As the gray pallor returned to his skin, his breathing grew shallow and rapid, and she realized that his body was responding to emotional trauma the same way it had responded to suppressed grief. "Harrison, please," she said, reaching toward him. "Your symptoms are coming back because you're fighting the healing that was working. Don't let fear undo the progress you've made." Harrison jerked away from her touch as if she were venomous. Don't you dare try to psychoanalyze me right now. I won't be manipulated anymore. I never manipulated you." Then explain the background check. Harrison slammed the report down on his desk, pages scattering like accusations. Explain the pattern of targeting grieving families. Explain why every wealthy person who's trusted you has ended up hurt or exploited. Kate stared at the scattered pages, seeing her mistakes and failures laid out like evidence in a trial she couldn't win. The Hendersons, who'd been so grateful for her comfort after their son's death that they'd wanted to leave her money she'd never asked for. The Washingtons, who'd begged her to share her grandmother's knowledge and then blamed her when traditional medicine failed their daughter. It's the hospital arrest when she'd been desperate to say goodbye to her dying father. "You're right," she said quietly, the fight going out of her voice. "I have made mistakes. I've gotten too involved with families I was supposed to be helping professionally. I changed my name because I was tired of being judged for those mistakes before people got to know who I really am." Harrison's angry expression faltered slightly, but his defensive walls remained firmly in place. "But everything I shared with you about healing and grief," Kate continued, "everything I felt for you and everything we experienced together, that was real. My grandmother's wisdom is real. Your healing over the past 2 days was real, and my love for you is real, whether you choose to believe it or not." Her cleaning supplies with dignity, though her hands shook with emotion. "I'll submit my resignation to building management tomorrow. You won't have to see me again." "Kate, wait," Harrison started to say, but the words died in his throat. Kate paused at the door and turned back to face him one last time. "You're going to get sick again, Harrison. Not because of any curse or folk magic, but because you're choosing fear over healing. You're choosing to believe the worst about thee. One person who saw the best in you." She opened the door, then looked back with tears streaming down her face. "I hope you find someone else who can help you remember that your daughter would want you to live, not just survive. Because despite what that report says about my past, my love for you and my desire for your healing were the truest things I've ever felt." The door closed softly behind her, leaving Harrison alone in his penthouse with the scattered pages of Kate's background check and the taste of regret already bitter in his mouth. Within an hour, his hands were shaking uncontrollably, and he was reaching for his phone to call Dr. Phillips. The healing had shattered, and Harrison Caldwell was once again a man running from his own heart. Sometimes fear makes us destroy the very thing that could save us. You think Harrison will realize his mistake before it's too late? Let me know your thoughts in the comments and subscribe. This story is far from over, and love might still find a way to triumph over fear. Harrison lay in the same hospital bed where he'd been 2 weeks earlier. But this time, the medical crisis was undeniably real. His immune system had crashed spectacularly within 48 hours of Kate's departure, landing him back in Dr. Phillips' care with symptoms that defied medical explanation, but fit perfectly with what Kate had tried to tell him about the connection between emotional trauma and physical illness. "Your white blood cell count has dropped by 60%, Dr. Phillips said, reviewing the latest test results with a mixture of professional concern and personal frustration. "Your cortisol levels are through the roof, and your body is essentially attacking itself." "What happened, Harrison?" 2 days ago, you were talking about canceling all your overseas treatments, and now you're sicker than you've ever been." Harrison stared at the ceiling, unwilling to admit that his condition had deteriorated the moment he'd chosen suspicion over trust, fear over love. The background check report sat on his bedside table, its damning facts offering no comfort now. That Kate was gone. "I made a mistake," he said quietly. "What kind of mistake?" Harrison closed his eyes, seeing Kate's face as she'd stood at his door. Hurt but dignified, loving him even as he destroyed everything beautiful between them. The kind that proves you can be brilliant about everything except what matters most. Dr. Phillips pulled up a chair, abandoning his usual clinical distance. "Harrison, I've been your doctor for 15 years, and I've never seen your body respond to emotional stress the way it has over the past month. When you came back from wherever you went that Friday, you looked healthier than you had in years. Now you look like a man whose will to live is slipping away." "Maybe it is," Harrison whispered. "That's not acceptable." Dr. Phillips leaned forward. "You have too much to offer the world. There's too many people depending on you. Your pharmaceutical research alone has saved thousands of lives." Harrison turned to look at his old friend. What if saving other people's lives was never about them? What if it was just my way of running from the one life I couldn't save? Annie. Harrison's voice broke on his daughter's name. "I've spent 5 years trying to atone for failing her. I finally found someone who helped me understand that loving her didn't require destroying myself. Then I threw it all away because I was too afraid to trust my own heart." Dr. Phillips was quiet for a moment. "The cleaning woman, Kate Bennett." Harrison nodded. She saw through everything. The wealth, the power, the medical mystery that stumped 20 specialists. She looked at me and saw a father grieving his child, and she helped me remember that grief. Shared is grief that can heal. What happened? Harrison gestured weakly at the background check report. "I had her investigated, found out she'd made mistakes with other families, gotten too involved, crossed professional boundaries. I convinced myself she was exploiting me, using my grief for her own purposes. And now I'm dying again. And she's probably packing to leave Chicago because I destroyed the most genuine connection I've felt since Annie died." Harrison's monitors began beeping more rapidly as his heart rate increased. "I chose fear over faith. Dr. Phillips, I chose to believe the worst about someone who gave me the first glimpse of healing I've had in 5 years." Dr. Phillips studied his patient's face. "Do you believe she was exploiting you?" Harrison was quiet. "For a long time, no. My head believed it for about 12 hours, but my heart never did. She knew things about grief and healing that no amount of research could teach. She cared about my recovery in ways that had nothing to do with money or advantage. She looked at me. She saw me. It's not Harrison Caldwell the billionaire, but the man who missed his daughter so much it was literally killing him." "Then why are you lying in a hospital bed instead of fighting for her?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Harrison realized that for all his business acumen and strategic thinking, he'd been approaching love like a board meeting, analyzing risks, calculating potential losses, protecting his assets instead of opening his heart. "Because I'm a coward," he admitted. "I'm brave enough to build pharmaceutical empires and donate millions to charity. But I'm terrified of telling a woman I love her and asking her to forgive me for being an idiot." Dr. Phillips smiled. "Well, that's the first honest thing you've said about your condition in years." Meanwhile, across the city, Kate sat on the floor of her Logan Square apartment, surrounded by boxes and the remnants of a life she was preparing to leave behind. Her resignation from building services had been accepted immediately. No questions asked, no explanation required. She'd found a job in Minneapolis, caring for an elderly woman with dementia, a position that would take her far from Chicago and the memories that seemed to live in every corner of the city. Her grandmother's recipe book lay open beside her, and Kate traced the faded handwriting with her finger. The remedies and wisdom passed down through generations felt hollow now, mocked. By her failure to heal the one person who'd mattered most? Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister in Kentucky. "Heard you're moving to Minneapolis? What happened to the job you loved in Chicago?" Kate stared at the message, unable to explain that she'd fallen in love with someone who'd chosen to believe the worst about her rather than trust what his heart knew to be true. She'd made mistakes in her past, gotten too close to family she was meant to help professionally, blurred boundaries in her desire to ease others' pain. But with Harrison, everything had been different, pure, real. Her phone rang, and Kate's heart leaped when she saw Northwestern Memorial Hospital on the caller ID. For a wild moment, she thought Harrison might be calling to apologize, to ask her to come back, to admit that his fear had made him cruel. Instead, it was Dr. Phillips. "Ms. Bennett, this is Dr. Jonathan Phillips, Harrison Caldwell's physician. I hope you don't mind me calling. but I got your number from the hospital's visitor registry. Kate's stomach clenched with worry. Is Harrison all right? No, he's not. He's back in the hospital, and his condition has deteriorated rapidly since. Dr. Phillips paused. Since whatever happened between you two, I'm calling because I need to understand what you did for him. Not the folk remedies or unconventional treatments, but what you did for his emotional state. Kate closed her eyes, remembering Harrison at Annie's grave, reading to his daughter. For the first time in 5 years, I helped him stop running from his grief. I helped him remember that loving someone doesn't require destroying yourself when you lose them. He's destroying himself again, Dr. Phillips said bluntly. His immune system is failing. His will to live seems compromised. And he keeps talking about mistakes and missed chances. Ms. Bennett, I've been treating Harrison for months, and I've never seen him as healthy as he was the day he came back from wherever you two went together. We went to Annie's grave, Kate said softly. He'd never visited her before. We spent the afternoon there, and he read to her from her favorite book. Dr. Phillips was quiet for a moment. He's been asking the nurses if anyone's called or visited. I think he's hoping you'll come back. Kate felt tears burning her eyes. He made it very clear that he doesn't trust me. He had me investigated, Dr. Phillips. He found out about my past mistakes and decided I was exploiting his grief for personal gain. And were you? The question should have offended Kate, but she heard genuine curiosity rather than accusation in Dr. Phillips' voice. No, I fell in love with him. Dr. Phillips. I watched him heal and grow and remember how to live instead of just survive, and I fell completely, hopelessly in love with him. Not with his money or his power, but with the man who cried when he finally let himself grieve for his daughter. Then why aren't you here? Kate looked around her apartment at the boxers and the plane ticket to Minneapolis, sitting on her kitchen counter, 'cause love isn't enough if there's no trust. Harrison chose to believe that my feelings were fake, that my care for him was calculated. I can't build a relationship with someone who sees me as a threat instead of a partner. What if he realizes he was wrong? Kate's heart ached with hope and fear in equal measure. Then he knows where to find me. But I won't chase someone who's already decided I'm not worth believing in. After Dr. Phillips hung up, Kate sat in the growing darkness of her apartment, torn between love and self-respect, between hope and the need to protect her own heart. In his hospital room across the city, Harrison stared at his phone, Kate's number glowing on the screen, his finger hovering over the call button. One conversation could change everything. If he was brave enough to choose love over fear, trust over suspicion, the choice that would determine both their futures lay in the space between wanting to call and finding the courage to actually do it. Christmas Eve stretched ahead of them, both full of possibility and heartbreak in equal measure. Sometimes the hardest person to forgive is ourselves, and the bravest thing we can do is risk our hearts one more time. The snow had been falling since midnight, blanketing Chicago in pristine white that made the city look reborn. Harrison stood at Annie's grave in the early morning light, wearing a heavy coat over his hospital gown and clutching a bouquet of yellow daffodils he'd somehow convinced a florist to deliver on Christmas morning. He discharged himself against medical advice for the second time in 2 weeks. But this time, he had a purpose that felt like salvation. "Hi, baby girl," he whispered, kneeling in the snow beside the granite headstone. "Daddy needs to tell you about someone. Her name is Kate, and she helped me remember how to be your father again, instead of just someone who was sorry you died." The morning was so quiet that Harrison could hear his own heartbeat, steady and strong for the first time in weeks. Being here, talking to Annie, felt as natural as breathing now. Kate's gift to him that no amount of fear or suspicion could erase. "I made a terrible mistake, Annie. I found someone who loved me. Really loved me. Not for money or status, but for the broken man I became after you left. And I threw it away because I was scared of being hurt." Harrison brushed snow from the headstone with trembling fingers. "Your mom would have said I was being stupid, and she would have been right." He pulled Kate's background check from his coat pocket. The same report that had seemed so damning 3 days ago, but now read like the story of a woman whose heart was too big for the world's rigid boundaries. "Kate made mistakes trying to help people, sweetheart. Just like Daddy made mistakes trying to save you. But her mistakes came from caring too much, not too little. And when she helped me finally come see you, when she held me while I cried for the first time since you died, that wasn't fake, Annie. That was love. A gentle breeze stirred the oak branches above, sending a shower of snow cascading down like nature's blessing. Harrison looked up and could have sworn he heard Annie's voice. On the wind, go get her, Daddy. 2 hours later, Logan Square. Kate sat surrounded by packed boxes, her plane ticket to Minneapolis tucked into her purse, her heart heavy with the weight of leaving behind the only place that had ever felt like home. She'd spent Christmas Eve crying and Christmas morning, trying to convince herself that starting over in a new city was the brave choice, not the cowardly one. Her phone had been silent since Dr. Phillips' call 2 days ago. Part of her had hoped Harrison might swallow his pride and reach out, but a larger part knew that some bridges once burned couldn't be rebuilt. A knock at her door made her heart race. Her landlord, maybe, or a neighbor checking on her. But when she opened the door, Harrison Caldwell stood in her hallway, snow melting in his silver hair, still wearing a hospital bracelet beneath his expensive coat. You left the hospital, Kate said, her voice barely above a whisper. I left to find you. Harrison's eyes were bright with determination and something else, hope maybe, or desperation. Kate, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen before you decide whether to slam the door in my face. Kate stepped back, allowing him into her modest apartment. Harrison looked around at the boxes, at the sparse furniture and the plane ticket visible on her kitchen counter, and his face fell. You're leaving. My flight's in 3 hours. Kate wrapped her arms around herself, trying to maintain emotional distance from the man who'd shattered her heart. There's nothing left for me in Chicago. There's me, Harrison said quietly. Kate felt tears threatening. You made it very clear what you think of me, Harrison. You chose to believe I was a predator who exploited your grief, rather than someone who genuinely cared about your healing. I was wrong. The words came out raw, honest. I was terrified and stupid and wrong, and I've spent the last 3 days dying. Because I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me. Kate wanted to believe him, but the pain was too fresh. You read my background check and decided everything between us was a lie. How do I know you won't do that again the next time? Fear makes you suspicious. Harrison reached into his coat and pulled out the crumpled background check, then did something that shocked Kate to core. He tore it in half, then in half again, letting the pieces fall to her floor like confetti. I've been visiting Annie's grave every morning since you left, Harrison said softly. And every day, I've talked to her about you, about how you helped me remember that she truly lived before she died. That being her dad isn't about feeling guilty forever, it's about living fully in her memory. Kate felt her resistance starting to fade. I love you, Kate, Harrison continued. His voice filled the small apartment with warmth. Not because you fixed him, though you did. Not because you saw past my money to my heart, though you did that too. I love you because when I was drowning in grief, you didn't stand on the shore trying to pull me out. You jumped in with me, taught me how to swim. Kate sat down on the couch, overwhelmed by how sincere he sounded. I made mistakes with the other families I worked for, she said quietly. I crossed lines. I got too involved. I know, Harrison said, kneeling in front of her and taking her hands. And I don't care. Your heart is too big for cold rules. You help people heal even when it costs you your job. It's not a weakness, it's a gift. Kate looked into his face, searching for the old doubt and suspicion. Instead, she saw only love, regret, and hope so strong it made her chest hurt. What about your illness? She asked. The specialists, the treatments. Harrison gave a small, joyful laugh. It's all gone. The day I finally admitted I'd been living in fear instead of love, my symptoms disappeared. Dr. Phillips ran every test. Everything is normal now. My white blood cell count, my cortisol levels, even the shaking. And my hands is gone. Kate stared at him in shock. Your body healed when your heart did, just like I said it would. Harrison kissed her hands gently. I'm not asking you to forgive me right away. I know I hurt you, but I am asking you not to get on that plane. Stay in Chicago. Give me a chance to show you that I've changed, that I choose love now and trust. Kate's heart was torn. What exactly are you offering, Harrison? Harrison stood and pulled a small velvet box from his coat. Kate gasped when she saw it. "I'm offering you everything," he said, opening it, "to show a beautiful ring that shone like sunshine. My heart, my future, a promise that I'll never doubt your love again, a chance to work together, your healing ways, and my resources to help other families dealing with pain and grief." Kate looked at the ring, a soft yellow diamond surrounded by tiny shining stones. "Yellow," she whispered. "Annie's favorite color," Harrison said with a smile. "I had it made yesterday. The jeweler said it was impossible on Christmas Eve, but, impossible just means more expensive." Kate laughed through her tears. The sound filled Harrison with more hope than any medicine ever could. "Are you proposing to me, Harrison Caldwell?" she asked. "I'm proposing a life together," he replied, his voice calm and sure. "A life where we honor the people we've lost by helping the ones we can still save. A life where your grandma's wisdom and my company work side by side. A life where love wins over fear." Kate looked at the ring, at Harrison's hopeful face, and at the plane ticket that meant escape and loneliness. Then she thought of Annie's grave, and Harrison reading to his daughter, and how healing had come when two hurting people chose to trust. "Yes," she whispered. Harrison's face lit up with pure joy. He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly like it had been made just for her. "There's one condition," Kate said as he pulled her into his arms. "Anything," he replied. "We visit Annie's grave every week. We keep reading to her." Harrison answered with a kiss that tasted like snow. Second chances, and forever. Outside, Chicago sparkled in the Christmas morning sun. And in Graceland, cemetery yellow flowers bloomed through the snow. As if a little girl was smiling from beyond, happy her dad had found his way back to life. Love had won. Healing had come. Two hearts that had once been broken were now whole. Because the best medicine didn't come from labs or hospitals. It came from love brave, true, and deep. 1 year later, the Caldwell Bennett Foundation for Healing opened. In downtown Chicago, combined Harrison's science background and Kate's understanding of how emotions affect the body. Their first patient was a 7-year-old girl with strange symptoms no doctor could figure out. But Kate saw it in her eyes' grief. The same kind Harrison had once carried. The girl's brother had died 6 months before. In just a week, with a mix of medicine and Kate's grandma's healing ways. The girl was smiling and laughing again. That May, Kate, and Harrison were married at Annie's grave under the sun, surrounded by yellow flowers and pure joy. Every Sunday they read to Annie together. And sometimes when the wind blew just right, you could almost hear a little girl's laughter dancing in the trees because love, in the end, was the most powerful medicine of all. Thanks for watching this story until the end. If you loved it, the next story will move your heart even more. Click the video on your screen to watch what happens next.